Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? Did any of you have to fight any crisis or turbulence during this time period till you're here? No? That's great. That's awesome. And we would like to welcome you to our panel where we're going to address this wonderful topic, crisis as a catalyst in the times of turbulence. Right? I mean, we're living in very interesting times where crisis and turbulence are no longer those exceptional events that we had to, we had the privilege to react to. These days, crisis, turbulence are a norm. Be it economical volatility, global uncertainty, technological disruptions, or organizational challenges. The leaders are bombarded with crisis every minute like it has never happened ever before. So therefore, crisis management is no longer a skill that you could have. It is just a must-have. Because we don't have the privilege to wait or be surprised by a crisis and react to it. We have to prepare for them in advance, proactively, and then create those adversities into opportunities. And all the business leaders who are here as panelists have been through that amazing journey. Personally, like I was introduced, I'm Preeti and I'm CEO of a company called Strive High, where our tagline says, soft solutions for tough problems. So we do consultancy and training in behavioral gaps. So we help organizations identify the gaps and overcome those gaps through, learning intervention. And we have helped many organizations transform, especially during crisis. We have a panel of exceptional leaders with us. Their journey is nothing less than extraordinary. They have seen crisis, they have overcome crisis, they have transformed businesses, and they are here to share with us their exceptional journey. And thank you to all of you for joining us today, all of you exceptional leaders. I would like to begin with a round of introductions. And I would like to begin with you, Suman. Kindly introduce yourself and share your connection with this topic.
Thanks a lot, Preeti, for... I think I'm connected. I'm connected? No? Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, now I'm connected. Okay, thanks a lot, Preeti, for starting this topic up really well. So my name is Suman Roy, and I'm the CEO of an organization called Feed Scarborough up in Canada. It's in the news lately here in the US. I'm sure everybody heard of that country. Some of you want to move there, I hear, but that's all good. Crisis. When we are talking about crisis, this is an organization that literally started in my backyard the first week our country was shutting down during COVID. And it's a food security organization. I was a chef by trade. Some of you might have heard about this company called Campbell Soup. I was their national corporate chef for Canada. I had a great job in the kitchen industry. But when this COVID hit, our only food bank in our community shut their door in the first week. And what I thought was just, I don't know about you, but I sincerely thought COVID's going to last for 2 weeks, curve's going to be flattened, and we're going to be back to normal. So I said, for 2 weeks, let's help the community. And now it's a multi-million-dollar organization having almost 15 full-time staff working and serving 8,500 people every week. And that has happened because of COVID, because of the pandemic. So over the next little while, we're going to talk a lot more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Joselina, please go ahead.
Thank you, Preeti. Good afternoon, everybody. So I have the pleasure to represent my organization, which is Stratix. I'm the founder and CEO. And my story is a little bit similar to my colleagues here on the panel. So we are purposely unlocking growth. We work with CXOs, with leaders, with entrepreneurs, with business owners, and with companies who actually want to deliver impact. So how do we do that? So through engineer strategies, leadership, and also to getting clarity to connecting your internal vision and mission with your external impact. And that is super important. There are 3 experiences that every company must have in coherence and in harmony. Your employees, your company is nothing without it, doesn't exist without it. Your clients, without them, that's the reason for you to exist. And your partners, in order to be able to, it's a live show, people. It happens. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much. So in your partners, right? So at the end of the day, when your clients and your employees are looking to approach you, it's through your capabilities and whether you invest directly or you actually lean in with your partners, suppliers, right? So capabilities, it's the power in numbers. So at the end of the day, if those 3 experiences, they don't work, you are dead in the water. And that becomes a crisis. It's a crisis of who you are, how are you aligned with the people that are actually there to help you succeed, and are you actually going to row in the same direction? So we're going to dive a little bit more into what happens in a crisis, and that's a question that I'm just going to tease in for you to actually think a little bit, because I think that that's going to spark a lot of conversations. And there are 3 things, just to maybe to give you a hint, that happens in a crisis. So we're going to come more with that.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Shelley.
All right.
Yeah.
My name is Shelley Frody, and my husband and I founded our company, City to Shore Real Estate, back in 2011. And then in 2017, we expanded that into franchising that business and growing through franchising. And we now have 7 franchisees with 14 locations in our state and looking to expand out beyond Michigan. And then we also, so we run the real estate company. I focus on the franchise company. We also have a real estate investment company with real estate holdings, some short-term rentals, and I own Executive Beauty Suites, which is a salon suites business where hairstylists can rent space from us in their own little suite and build their own little business within our suites. So
That's nice. Amazing. How about you, Erica? Kindly introduce yourself.
My name is it working? My name is Erica Hansen, and I work with accounting transformations. We've recently branched out. Our group is called the Wisdom Collective LLC. We are focusing on consulting, training, coaching for businesses and team members. We've focused a lot in the past on accounting transformations. My background is accounting transformations and all the adjacent operations to make it happen. So picture high growth companies didn't make the proper investment in infrastructure at the right time. Now they're scaling and everything's falling apart. And so we come in and reorganize everything so that they can get ready for their scale. The other side of it is we also work with distressed and turnaround companies. So it's usually, hair on fire, house is burning down when we get in. So welcome to crisis management. But that's kind of where our sweet spots are, is coming in and helping. And recently we've done a lot of pivoting to also include training for owners to try to help them not become distressed and turnaround companies. So doing a lot on the front end, helping startups, things along those lines.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, so we know who to look for in this fire. All right, yeah. Let me invite Anthony now.
Yes, so I want to make sure I don't over time. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Anthony Berryhill. I work for my own company called Elite College Hacker. I'll explain that in about 5 seconds. But the last 20 years, my personal life and my professional life and academic life have all revolved around the thesis that there are many people in companies, in schools, in their neighborhoods, who, here comes Oscar reference, whose lives are like the cat in the movie Flow. They're drowning and almost no one's there to help them. And in my own personal life, I lived in the inner city of New Orleans, 3615 Desire Parkway, which was entirely racially segregated. And frankly, the graduation rates were under 10%. So in my case, my getting out of that environment was shocking to everyone. When I got into Stanford as an undergrad, people called my mom in the neighborhood saying, "You must be playing football, right? There's no way you got in through academics." And I understand why they had that stereotypical assumption. A lot of our educational systems tragically fail not just people who would fit diversity, equity, inclusion, but they hurt everyone. And so, in other presentations and talks, we've talked about things with millennials like, why don't people know how to write emails? Why don't they have professional skills? And what I learned going through Stanford as an undergrad, a PhD at Yale, is that a lot of those institutions our schooling in general, it just doesn't teach people those skills. It assumes that people already have those resources. And what I found out, when I, at those schools is, well, those systems fail everyone. And so what I've tried to do is to fill in those gaps. So as an academic, as a PhD student, I worked at Stanford where I was asked to join the writing committee and work with the dean of writing to figure out why, what is wrong with the AP writing curriculum so that students don't know how to write well. And at Yale, I was asked to work with professors and to explain to them, hey, the way you're presenting this information is assuming people have cultural context that they don't have, that they don't understand. So what I've learned on my whole career is that those kind of assumptions are ones that create crises that eventually turn into catastrophes. Most recently, I also worked as a VP at PIMCO as an executive officer, where they hired me specifically because the house was burning down. We were facing 60% attrition. We were facing return to office issues. And one of the things I'll say in my comments here is that a lot of those reasons that the inclusion conversation we're having, it's a universal problem. That when we don't think about our employees as customers, as people who have very intense needs, we don't think about the institutions and the norms that we use to identify who is a good leader, who is a high potential person, we're not just ignoring crises when we could stop them, but we're creating future catastrophes that occur later. So my entire work has been on that front. And then I guess right now, the hacker word is because I'm currently a college admissions coach full time, and I'm hoping to kind of move into more of the enterprise work and to kind of upscale to bring a lot of these insights so that everyone has access to them, not just people who happen to be born in very fortunate situations.
That's amazing. And we can see that we have a very diverse panel and everybody is an expert in a very different field. So, which means that there's a lot that we can, bring out from them and learn from their journey. I would like to begin with Shelley, Shelley, it's really interesting to see how you and your husband started with your business, and then you both created so many franchisees, and then you've diversified into beauty salons and all of those things. You mentioned that you've gone through crisis. Mm-hmm. Is there any learning that you've learned from crisis through, the crises that you've gone through, and that has shaped your understanding of managing risk and how you turned it into opportunity?
Yeah. Well, first I'll tell you, there's two major crises that I went through. The first one was when we started our company in 2011. We started our company on February 3rd, and on the 7th, our youngest daughter was diagnosed with AML leukemia right after we started our company. And so here we, had all these big goals and dreams of what we were going to do, and we were stopped dead in our tracks. Very small company. It was just my husband and I. So those next 3 weeks we spent in the hospital dealing with our daughter. And after 3 weeks, my husband and I looked at each other and said, we need to pay the bills and buy food. So we need to figure out what we're going to do here. So our solution at that point in time was I basically stepped back from our brand new company and focused in on our daughter, and Steve focused in on the business. And I would help him and he would help me. But there was a lot of, even though we were small, we hired a few different people to help us as well. And what I really learned during that time was to just let go and empower people. People want to help you. Your employees that you hire want to help you, and just let them help you. Empower them to do that. Don't micromanage them. And that was an amazing, amazing time, and our company grew really tenfold that first year. And then the very next thing that we had was after we started franchising, we built our own software system because we couldn't find software to do what we wanted it to do. And we had that software for a couple of years, and it wasn't quite living up to the way we wanted it to, so we were going to go with a different company and basically rebuild it. In that process, we were hacked and held for ransom. And so I had to go to all my franchisees who bought the franchise based on the systems and tools that I offered, right? And teach them how to do those things manually instead of using a software system. And then the other thing that we did during that time, fortunately, we had already started that process of building a second software system. We just hit the ground running and speeded that whole process up. We were originally planning on it taking a year to build it, just taking our time and doing it right. We did it very fast to get it up and running again. But what I learned through that is just how important it is to have strong communication skills with people and letting them know, what are you going to be doing to fix this, right? And being completely transparent about what was going on, because the last thing somebody wants is a leader that has their hair on fire and is worried about it. You have to go in with strength and resilience to give them that strength and resilience as well.
That's great. I mean, anybody would like to add something to that? Yeah. Well, then I would like to. Yeah. Nobody. Then I would like to ask Erica. You are the one who was talking about when the house is on fire. Just come look for me, and I'm the one who's going to be the savior. So and very nicely, Shelley just pointed out that communication is the key, and how to keep people close and make them understand that what's important, what we're doing. And you are the one who's led a lot of transformations, Erica. So how do you make sure that people don't burn down during the times of crisis? And how do you keep the employees engaged and so that they don't lose momentum and they continue to contribute and do their best? So how do you ensure that?
So let's frame a few things real quick.
Yeah.
So when we're usually brought in, there's a lot happening, right? So whether it's coming into a high growth company that is having some major issues keeping up with the growth, or whether it's a distressed company coming in, or a startup that is running out of runway and they're going to need to get through a quality of earnings and they don't have their ducks in a row. When we come in, there's usually a lot of urgency. But when we come in, there's usually, there's been an erosion for a while, right? And when that erosion has been happening, it takes a toll on all the people that are there. Even companies that are performing well, if there's some sort of dysfunction happening underneath, whether it's cultural, whether it's systems, whether it's people, whether it's like environment making heavy impacts, that erodes everybody's resolve, right? It that kind of stress and dysfunction just eats away at everybody involved. And usually when we're coming in, we're usually at a very high stress situation. Now, myself and my teams, we are usually in the middle of things, and the things that we are dealing with, like in 3 months in one project, can be more than some people ever see in 3 years of their regular job. Because we're just coming in and just basically untangling all the spaghetti and trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and where they need to go and what it should look like. And so when you have that kind of like erosion that's been slowly like pulling at everybody that's in there, sometimes we walk into a situation and we say, okay, this is where we're going to start, and we start digging in. And when a lot of times we'll start in accounting, because accounting, every sin of the company will show up in accounting one way or another. You want to look for a healthy company, you go really dig into their accounting. But we usually start with the accounting, and we start, digging in people, processes, and systems, right? Those three prongs. And we start evaluating teams and how they interact and if there's any processes. Sometimes there's not anything to start with. We look at systems way back deep down in tables, how they're working, how they were set up, how they're being used, all of those things. When we start digging into that, sometimes the current teams that are there, they have hit such a wall, and they have not had support for so long or felt like they just weren't getting anywheres. I have come in and said, we are going to fix it. Let's start digging through it. And within a month, they all are like, I'm done. They were just waiting for the ability to pass it on. I've come in and the entire team has quit before. And it wasn't because of anything I did. It was just they were so maxed out that one more thing was just pushing them over the ledge. So coming in and starting sometimes from zero with no one helping you. The thing is, to keep them motivated, you have to basically use, change manage principles like on steroids. So, making sure communication is clear, trying to be as transparent as possible without scaring the hell out of everybody so that they, quit and you don't get anywheres. So there's a fine balance in there. Making sure that everybody understands what their part is in playing, working through that gap project planner, right? Making sure they know what their other team members are doing, because not only what you're doing, it doesn't make difference for the employees if they don't understand where they fit in the group, right? Which is great for anything. It's not just change management. But if they understand how they're working, having like team subgroups that are meeting saying, okay, what are you working on today, right? What are you working on today? And then getting them to start talking about, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing something that might affect you, right? You want them to start thinking about that. I have something that'll be affecting you. Maybe we should talk so we're not duplicating effort. So getting that, it's the basic principles of building a high performance team, but you're doing it like in a very condensed format with a lot of stress and a lot of things happening on it. And the really big important things are you gotta celebrate the wins. Even if they're really tiny, it's really important. The other thing that I like to do is I like to play storytelling, right? So when we're sitting there and we're working through, 1 month has 5,000 lines of data, and we're having to do a reconciliation that has been done in like 2.5 years, and we're working through, trying to get that done, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna take days and days and days, right? They're working through it, and I'm like, keep it up. I was like, picture this, right? Imagine we get to close and you're looking at all this data and you can like work through it. It takes you like an hour. You've got it done. Everything ties, and we go to the next thing. Think how really cool that's going to be. And they're like, oh yeah, they see the vision. They know where we're going. They get excited. They stay engaged. They start coming up with new ideas. They start adding in the new ideas. And, sometimes you can shortcut processes because new ideas come up as they're going. So they're engaged. They're, got those creative juices going.
That's awesome. I mean, that's great the way you mentioned that and the way you highlighted communication across it. You want to add something?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to give a more of a CEO perspective. So I say this very cautiously here, but you cannot pour water out of an empty jug. Yeah. And that is something that we cannot forget, even as a CEO, as a leader of an organization. We just heard a panel talk about work-life balance. I always say you need to have your balance. And whatever that might be, it is different for everybody around this room. There is no one size that fits all. And you need to take that time to make sure what really works for you. For me, I really like to listen to the news. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I'll just walk down to my car, start my car, and listen to the news for 10 minutes, and then come back and start working again, because that charges me. So everybody has a charging button that needs to be clicked. And that is important when you're dealing with crisis, because that will help you survive.
I wanted to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
So building from the conversation, I just wanted to maybe touch on maybe a different lenses to put on when we look at crisis, right? So by shows of hands here, How many of you have overcome a crisis? So pretty much everybody, right? And there's different degrees of crisis, right? So you can have actually preventable crisis, right? And you can also have crises that really they sneak up on you and they surprise you, right? Now, if we look at that, it's not always negative. For all those who raise their hand and say that they survived the crisis, how did you felt after going through it? Better? Worse? Better? More? Lessons learned. Better, right? So nobody has, I didn't hear anybody saying worse. Sorry? Both. Depends on the degree, right? So, and here's the thing though, at the end of every crisis, there's always a lesson learned. There's always something that you could have done, so then maybe there's some maybe analytical looking back and trying to capture what I should have done, listen, do X, Y, Z, right? Because there are some preventable crises. But usually you come out of it stronger, better prepared for the next time around. It's not gonna surprise you. Maybe it's a new one, right? But not the same one. It's unlikely to repeat. And the thing is that usually crisis is a teacher, right? We often don't look at it in that, necessarily in that perspective. And this is really the important thing. I think I said OITs at the beginning that 3 things happen in a crisis. Can anybody here volunteer what those 3 things are? No? I'll tell you one. Some people panic. That's the first human response in a crisis, right? The second one, a lot of people pivot, right? So they decide, okay, I need to change something. It's in the bell curve, but somewhere there. And then the third part is that innovate, right? Because what got you to that point definitely is not gonna get you out of it. So you need to tap into a different way and look at maybe upside down, maybe, or outside in, or sideways, however fits your groove, right? So, and this is the thing though, it's not, the topic here is how do we use it as a catalyst? Let's not forget. Sometimes it's like, okay, we're wallowing and getting into the dark hole of, my God, pity me, pity party. Okay, great. But other than that, let's actually use it for something that is going to be positive in the end. Because from a breakdown, you get a breakthrough, right? Usually. So, and my background is supply chain and operations, so similar to my fellow Erica. So I'm the firefighter who runs through the chaos when people are actually having issues. And one of the things that it's super important is that do not beat yourself down. Yes, it's important to have a plan. It's important to look at your strategy. It's important to look how you're set up for the ever-changing world. Like today, Canada and Mexico has new tariffs that people who are actually importing and having business there, that they didn't wake up with that reality. So what are you gonna do there, right? But this is the thing. Your strategy and your vision is the same, but your mission and your strategy, they have to be adaptable and they have to be scalable.
That's really nice. I mean, actually, that brings me to the next question, which I would like to pose to you. Because you said that there are three important stakeholders, like three most important parts is the team, the customers, and the different stakeholders that you engage with. And during the times of crisis, it's really essential that you're having the right conversation with all of them, and you're managing all of them very, very well. And you just mentioned right now, like how we emerge successful, better after the crisis. So how would you like to, I would like you to shed some light on having the kind of conversations that you should be having, communicating with these 3 in order to drive, successfully all the 3 together. Yeah.
That's an amazing question, Preeti, and thank you for asking, and I'll do my best. So one of the things is, to surprise of many, it's just conversing with people as humans, which comes sometimes as a surprise, right? So empathy, right? So I cannot stress it enough. At the end of the day, transparency is key, right? So think about human nature. If you are not given information, you're gonna complete that square with the knowledge that you believe that you know. One way or the other, right? And it's been studied, this is not by me. So In reality, honesty, you just have to treat the others how you would, actually, honestly, is the golden rule, how you would treat yourself. So you have to do this often, timely, consistently, and be open about it. If you cannot disclose something because legally you're bound or there's some element that is confidential, say it. I cannot tell you this at this time because I'm legally bound by X, Y, Z, right? And when I can, this is the information that I can share with you. The other thing is that we usually assume the worst in people. Isn't that interesting? Instead of actually assuming the best in people. And the thing is that most professionals, when given information, I'll give you a practical example with this. Given the information timely, honest, and empathetic, they will actually not only be thankful for it, but they will show you their best side. And I'll give you an example. When I was working in the lubricant additives industry, so we were actually I was tasked to shut down all of the operations that were not meeting the gross profit margin. So it was a huge number of plants, offices that we actually needed to right size and shut down. Imagine, there's no way that you can message that in a pretty way to anybody that has been working 30 years and tell them, by the way, your job has ended, right? So, and I met long and hard with the CEO, with, of course, the legal counsel team, the HR people, right? So everybody. And I said, if you allow me, I actually propose a different process here. I really want to make sure that as much as we can, we communicate upfront with the people. Why? Because we have to support them. If they need to find a job elsewhere, then let's do that right. Let's actually not only go above and beyond to the letters of recommendation, but let's try to find them a real opportunity. And if there's opportunity internally within the company, let's allow them to actually then apply for those roles and have a chance to actually get a new position if they're willing to actually adapt. So we did that process very, very transparent with everybody. And I can tell you to this day, even the people who are no longer within the company, they're my connections on LinkedIn. I've been invited to weddings, baptisms, okay? So I know a lot of these people personally. Why? Because even in the moment where there's a difficult conversation, if you have it from a human-to-human aspect with somebody, they will remember that. They will value that. And they will actually believe you. So this is the point that, if anything, I want you to walk away with, is that if you treat people expecting the best, they're going to give you that. If you treat people expecting the worst, they're going to give you that.
Very well said. I think that's amazing. That being transparent, being honest, and if you're not honest to your people, you can't expect people to be honest to you. So that's really fair. And I think you made a very, very valid point there. I would like to now move on to Anthony. Anthony, you've been the journey that you have at Stanford and talent management stuff. It's been really amazing. And you've also helped people. You are helping in managing crisis.
Yep.
So. Is there something that you can do, say, scenario planning or something that, or some strategy that you would like to share with people dealing with crisis or as a plan, backup plan that they can manage?
Yeah.
Later on, we'll come to the audience. So yes, Anthony,
I'm
please.
going to get pretty operational and kind of in the trenches here, because I talk to hundreds of people who work at companies like the big high-tech companies, the finance companies, the Goldman Sachs, et cetera, and there are three things I see that usually creates a total mess. The first thing is, and I think this speaks to some of the comments on the panel, is that sometimes senior leaders, and not necessarily at the C level, but sometimes yes, they'll punish people who are actually warning them that a crisis is happening. And this often happens with the people who get, one of my sayings in HR is like, if I want to know why a company is failing, let me see the performance reviews and what is written. The stuff I see is often super racist, sexist, sometimes homophobic, and they're signed off by people who should know better, sometimes on the HR team. And what happens to those people who are treated that way, who are never fast-tracked? They're often the top performers objectively, and the people who are not minorities, who are their friends, will all leave too. There was even one company, I won't say any names or hints here, where they lost 12 of their top performers who are all people of color, and then they lost another 40 people who said, look, they're my friends. If you're going to treat them that way, and you're telling me I'm a top performer, why should I'm going to be next. And that happens again and again across so many industries. The second thing that happens is also, follows the first, is that often companies will starve out their HR functions. So they will say words like, we have a lean HR team. When I hear that, I run away. It's like the game's over. They will say, we need to be more efficient, have project management. But I have a PMP. PMPs do not tell you, hey, starve our HR team and have only 3 people for a job of 10. But it's a consistent pattern that guarantees mass catastrophes. The third thing is terrible messaging. So sometimes senior leaders will have this, and this often happens with HR teams, even DEI teams, they will have this archetype of a kind of communication. They will use words like executive presence, but when I ask them what that means, they can't see it, right? And then when something like COVID happens, or a return to office project, which I've done a lot of RTO projects, the language that comes out sometimes in the news will be something like, I'm trying not to say the company's name, they'll say things like, you're not working if you're not in the office. But think about what that means to the employee. You're telling the employee who was stressed out, who was worrying about COVID, worrying about people dying, that the work they did during that time was not work at all. And that's where bad things happen. So how do we stop those things? One idea is fault testing, which from computer science, is to go through processes and actively ask yourself, where can this go wrong? And sometimes the things we miss is because of stereotypical assumptions in our own heads. I've even worked with people who will say, well, I expect that everyone here has a car. Hold on a second. Really? What does that have to do with the job? Your top performer who has an innovative, disruptive idea may not drive. Or they'll say, here's one fun example. Well, we're on a portfolio management team. We want people who come from University of Chicago. Well, heck, I went to Stanford and Yale, disqualified, right? So actively going through those processes. One quick example, like a big part of my jobs have been working on onboarding and trying to make onboarding programs, quote, not suck. And one of the ways we increase KPIs for salespeople, client service people, is by really destroying the assumptions we have about how do we communicate with people and giving people information that they need to know for their jobs versus information that the C-levels and senior managers have their noses in there thinking you need to hear. For example, I remember once a training that was, let me tell you the 100 details on pricing. What does a junior associate who's a Gen Zer, why do they need to hear that? Why do they need to know that? Right? And so many of our learning institutions, both in the fancy Ivy Leagues and also in the corporate in America, are so tied around the feelings and the archetypes and the assumptions and stereotypes of the senior leaders. And then we end up wondering why we have mass, poor results and mass attrition. So what I do is I have brainstorming sessions where I will say, who is your persona? Who's your average client? And that's when all the assumptions come out. And then we can test those assumptions across the line. It could be so one example I've heard is, well, we don't know why Gen Zers don't know how to write email. And I will ask the question, have you tested the assumption that colleges even teach Outlook? They don't, right? So sometimes it's our job, if we want to solve those problems, and I've done that for a lot of companies, is to fill in those gaps that may feel icky for senior leaders, but for our employees, it's absolutely necessary.
That's great.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
By the way, accounting and HR is the heart of the business. When they are running smoothly and beautifully, it is a thing of beauty. And they are, they're the first places that everybody wants to cut when it's time to budget cut, right? But when a leader comes to me and says, well, they're non-revenue generating, I say, well, they're not technically revenue generating, but they're revenue protection and risk mitigation departments. So the money that they can save you by walking down the hall and hear somebody say something about doing something stupid, and they stop them from doing it and keeps you out of litigation, guess what? You just got money that you could put back into the business that you're not spending on lawyers and litigation. So when they're working, it's like they're numbers and people whisperers, right? So they're seeing all these things that are early warning flags for problems within the organization, right? And they're stopping things on a regular basis from continuing to happen. So, I understand where you're going with that, but I agree. So we need to change our perspectives about how we look at things and how they connect, right? And where problems start. Because when we start looking at root causes that caused our crisis, and we're zooming in and out to identify it, then that's where we start stopping them before they happen.
That's amazing. And that actually brings me, because we're running short of time, I would like to go to Suman, because he's represented his organization and multiple organizations at the UN, and he has that experience in leadership role. I would like to know from you, what is that one quality that if you would like to suggest for a leader to have in order to, manage crisis, evolve from crisis effectively? Yeah.
How many hours do we have? No, I'm just kidding. So I think there are many qualities that one needs to have. I can talk about innovation. You have talked about quite a few already. But I think one thing which is not always easy, but I think a key thing that a leader needs to have, especially dealing with crisis, is when you are sitting in a burning house, you are sitting and thinking, where is that water and how can I really pour it on my head so I'm not burning? It's really difficult, very difficult to do. There's no question about it. Because the minute the leader goes into the panic mode, everybody's burning. There is no way out. So having that calmness and coolness in you, though it is very difficult, and you know that you're probably burning inside to even do that, but that, I think, is something that we need to have if we are really dealing with crisis, no matter what level of crisis it is. Even if it is your daughter fell down from somewhere and have a scrape in the knee. Even at that point, it is any crisis you have, it is very important to have that calmness, demeanor, because your body language speaks.
That's really amazing. I think any other point that anybody else, or I would like to, open the floor for the audience. Any question that you would like to ask the panelists? Anything? Yeah, there is. Yeah, please go ahead.
I ask all the questions.
I'm Janet, Generation X, but I do have, my kids are Gen Z. And I just want to point something that I hear a lot, and especially coming from our generations. We tend to criticize younger generations instead of like you said, they don't know how to write an email. Do they really need to learn how to write an email with the tech?
Yeah.
They don't. I mean, a lot of them, I'm like, they don't even know how to do math the way they used to do it. They're gonna need it. The way they're gonna learn things are gonna move differently than when we were in school. They have all the technology that they don't need to even know how to take notes. Because now ChatGPT does it. Any AI can take notes on the email. So I just wanna say that perhaps what we should be looking into helping those generations is that how can we help them? How can we, and going back to the job thing, I always believe that if we trust them, even as my kids, you gotta trust them first for them to be able to be confident. There's no way they can be confident if you don't trust them. Everybody says, I'm not gonna let my kids drive, in the highway because I don't trust everybody else. No, the point is not trusting everybody else. You need to trust your child so he feel confident that he can go out there. The same thing is at work. You need to let me trust me that I'm gonna be able to execute the job. Then if you see that I wasn't, okay, where can I help you to? Where do you feel, how do you, how can we get it? So I just wanted to say that.
I think that's really wonderful what you said, because I mean that the younger generation, which has grown up in an entirely different environment and having the same standards to judge them is not right. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I would like to comment. So thank you so much, Janet. And absolutely, you're correct that evolution is going to dictate a lot of the tools and a lot of the resources that is going to be available. One maybe comment to expand your point is that in order for people to know how to use technology, whether if it's AI or any other tool that is going to be available, it's important to actually foster the critical thinking in the mind, right? Because the tool is only going to be able to respond to the type of questions that you're going to ask. And if the person is not well-versed into the content, the experience and the background, which they may not have at that point in time, they don't know what kind of questions they're going to ask. So I would say I think it's a combination somewhere between developing your teams with trust, but also to give them the ability to develop critical thinking and having those conversations to expand everybody's viewpoints.
Problem solving is also something that we have to continually develop. And we're not training the way we used to in companies. And that's contributing to some of the problems that we're running into now. And when we start training them and getting them a good base for the problem solving and the critical thinking, because problem solving and critical thinking, that's a muscle you have to build, right? You start early on in your years and you start building it as you start getting experience, as you start, getting through trainings. And that's, you've got to work through it. So is with with AI, in the accounting groups, a young person that's in their early, career may not understand how critical it is that confidential information can't go into the tool, right? And if they don't have that experience, or they don't have the frame of reference, or they don't have the training, then that's going to cause a problem, and that problem's going to ripple into other things. So making sure that they understand the parameters and some of the impacts of what you do is very important too. So as we go through and training those teams, it's very important.
Yeah.
And that back,
So,
go back to communication.
Correct.
that's okay. We have one more question, and then absolutely. So please go ahead.
What type of structure do you use when something goes sideways? It happens, you learn from it. A lot of companies use after-action reviews. What have you found works?
What it found works?
Yeah,
Well,
we can.
I think what worked for us in the different things that we had happen was just a lot of communication along the way. And then even afterwards, getting together with everybody and saying, what was it that we could have done better? What kinds of things did we do well through this crisis? Because if you don't step back and look at what you did after in going through that crisis, it's not going to help you when the next one comes along either. So you really need to sit back and analyze that and find out from the people that you're working with, hey, what did I do good during this time? What did you like? How did you like the communication that we had? And then what could have I done better? So
I think that's wonderful. We went through a crisis during COVID because we do training programs, and all the training programs would happen even earlier in a room like this, and it all stopped. And our team, like many other companies, they did lose a lot of business. And at that time, me and our team, we said, okay, now let's learn, get back to the table. Let's create an organization where the learning is a culture. And I started, being the CEO of the organization, I said, I'll go and take my first lesson first. So how do I do a training on Zoom? What are the essentials to put our training programs online? So our training head, she started doing training on how to create the LMS and put the programs online. Our assessment head, okay, we will no longer give away with these assessments. We create new assessments. So all of us took new challenges, and we spoke about it, and every time celebrating wins. I'm doing this, I've learned this, I'm going to put it to practice. I'm going to talk to this organization whether they would like us to do a webinar now or do this training now. And the assessment girl saying, and let me tell you that the Marcom person was a Gen Z. And this one was amazing. So actually understanding what is everybody's strength and what role they can play in driving innovation, overcoming this challenge, and giving them the ownership. They all felt so full of energy, and that, Preeti, I have an idea. Preeti, I have this idea. And then the youngest one, because she was much better than us in managing this Gen AI stuff and all of that technological things, we would talk about things and she would create the whole thing and give it to us. Like, Preeti, isn't this you spoke about? And then she would create a new Canva tool and this tool and that tool, and very creative. And I felt, do I think Gen Z is not good enough? I was really questioning myself, which So I think identifying the strengths, giving them the ownership, lead by example, show them, and then keep going. Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but one.
So just-
I just wanted to answer something
Yeah, I'll
for the
be
gentleman.
very, very fast. Two things to add to that. I think one, in terms of best practice for project management is having like a lessons learned ongoing all of the time. One of the biggest things I see that causes mass catastrophes is that senior leaders will not want to even hear about conversations like return to office, like which I try to warn people about 5 years before COVID, until it happens. So having that ongoing process of, okay, I see this problem, we're going to put it in a risk register, we're going to calculate the risk, we're going to even have a contingency plan, even if we don't think this is going to happen, because so often employees get really angry because they think, you're the C-level and you didn't even have a thought about how you'd start. So having that like kind of baked in first, and then second, I would even argue empower, like changing the way we hire HR people, because so often HR people are kind of hired to be, well, do whatever the senior leadership says, but then they can't protect you when there are things that are, cybersecurity issues, or or litigation issues, or just personnel issues. So hiring HR people who have content knowledge on, in terms of your comment, pedagogy, right? How to teach well, or hiring people who know tech, hiring people who know. My God, econometrics would make my life a lot easier. Just people who know statistics, that would go a long way to build up the muscle so that when you need to use those muscles, you're not you're not in big trouble.
That's amazing. Suman?
So just to answer your question, before you start the process, I think the first and foremost that I always keep in mind, do not be afraid to own up to your issue and accept the problem. If ego comes in way, you're dead right there.
Just to add to that, specifically to answer your question, we do two things that typically has worked best in the results. We pressured, so in addition to the look back, which it was already pretty much, exhausted, we also recommend pressure testing the strategies and the plan by scenario planning and actually put it to the worst potential realities. This is more preventive maintenance. And also the other tidbit is to benchmark not only within your peer group of industries, but also outside. What's the next level up or next level down? And that will actually give you some insight of things that maybe you are not doing, that you should be looking into, or things that maybe you should be considering investing, or maybe when you need to close the gap.
Also, during the crisis, zoom in and zoom out and use those insights to increase your agility, right? Because your agility to pivot quickly when environments are changing rapidly can be you're going to die or not, right? It's going to make that difference. The other thing is when you're doing the after actions, it's always important to do everything that we've suggested, but go back to the root cause. Where did it all start? If you don't know where it started, you don't know how to fix it and what to watch for. So you've got to do the root cause. What happened to start with, right?
That's really amazing. I can see that the panelists are very passionate about the topic. They really know it, and they have so much to say. And absolutely, the time is not enough, and it'll never be enough. But I would and like to thank them for sharing their journey and really opening up their heart and problems and challenges and sharing with everybody. That was really amazing. The audience, you've been so good, very supportive, asking questions. It was really amazing being with you all. Well, when the wind blows, we have two options. One, create a wall. Second, create a windmill. Now it depends. It's all about our mindset. How do we take challenge? How do we see the challenge, the problem as a challenge, as a threat, or do we see it as an adversity, as an opportunity, and grab it and mold it into creating something new? And that's what our panelists have demonstrated, how they have created opportunities. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really thank you for this, and thank you, CXO.